Welcome to the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. This is the podcast where we discuss both Star Trek and the Orville here on the Fandom Podcast Network. On this show, we take an in-depth look at each of these franchises and discover that both of them can coexist in fandom today, as they introduce us to fresh, new, and exciting stories, characters, galactic destinations, and so much more. But you know what? This is the ship, Union Federation, and it takes a crew to run it. And I've got a top-notch crew here, starting with the lady who handles all the weapons and everything sciencey on the ship, Miss Hayley Stoddard.
Hello, it is good to be back, and I'm excited to talk some stuff this week.
Yeah, I needed somebody with a green thumb. I don't know if I got the right guy for this or not. I know he's good with green children, but... You know, I don't know, but he's my co-founder here on the Fandom Podcast Network. He's the host of Blood of Kings, Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
Green thumb I do not have. Plants don't like me. They die. Probably because I forget to water them. But it's good to be on the ship. I like to look at plants. I don't try to, cultivate them or nurture them.
Understandable. And somebody who I know will make sure the plants have plenty of Romulan ale in their diet, which, leads to rapid growth for some reason. I don't know why, but Miss Amy Nelson is once again on the Union Federation ship. Amy, welcome to the show.
Hello, and yes, glad to be here again.
So, we are looking at Star Trek Discovery Episode 5 of Season 3, Die Trying, this week. Interesting episode, I've got to say. I think we're going to have some interesting talk about that. But before we get into that, I'm going to open up some hailing frequencies. Mr. Reitzel, would you care to tell everybody where they can find Union Federation?
Of course. Well, first of all, you can find the Union Federation, of course, on the Fandom Podcast Network, and the Fandom Podcast Network is now on YouTube. Please head on over to YouTube, search Fandom Podcast Network. Please give us a subscribe and like the episodes that you either watch or you listen to. All of our audio podcasts, of course, will feed on there as well. And our master feed for all of our audio podcast is on fpnet.podbean.com. You can also stream the Fandom Podcast Network on that Podbean app. Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, which of course includes Apple Podcast and iTunes. Please join us over on the Union Federation Facebook page. We talk all Star Trek and Orville over there, and we're all part of that. So feel free to come and join that. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Union Fed Podcast. And you can also like and check out our main Fandom Podcast Network Facebook page. If you'd like to contact us directly, you can email us at theunionfederation@gmail.com. My name is Kevin. I am on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. Kyle, where can we find you?
You can find me floating around on Twitter at AKyleW or hanging out on Instagram as AKyleFandom.
And Hayley, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I am at Trekkie01D. And because it came out, you can also find me over on Trek FM's Standard Orbit, where I host all things the original series.
Very cool. And Amy, where can we find you and what are you up to?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, and I host a couple of other podcasts. You can search for All Good Things and Galaxy Class. Very cool.
First of all, there's a couple ways you can support the Fandom Podcast Network and the Union Federation podcast. Please visit our TeePublic store. Search for Fandom Podcast Network or Union Federation. I'm wearing the cool Union Federation podcast t-shirt, among other great images and cool designs that you can find there. You can put on anything very cool, all kinds of apparel and cups and all kinds of cool stuff. So every time you purchase something there, you help us out. Also, we love reviews. Please head on over to Apple Podcast and iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and please leave us a rated review. Just search Fandom Podcast Network. Back to you, Kyle.
Okay, well, we're taking the ship out of space dock, and like I said earlier, we're going to be talking about Star Trek Discovery, Season 3, Episode 5, Die Trying. So without further ado, let's head into the Officer's Lounge. Very interesting episode of Discovery this week. I'm going to kick things off. I'm going to read the teaser on the show for everybody and the first act. So let's start with the teaser. In a log entry, Saru says that the USS Discovery is preparing to arrive at the headquarters of the Federation and Starfleet and hopes for a welcome reception. As Saru stands in a corridor gazing out a window, Commander Michael Burnham approaches him and confirms the ship's reports, records, and logs are prepared to be handed over to Starfleet. Burnham notes that there will be many questions about the burn, but says she has other things to ask about as well. Her mother, Gabrielle Burnham, who Burnham previously learned was not on Terra Elysium. They arrive on the bridge where Lieutenant Kayla Detmer informs them Discovery has arrived at Federation headquarters. The view screen shows a distorted starfield, a security measure to mask the location, but Saru says Discovery is expected and orders Detmer to fly the ship forward. As it pierces the distortion field, the crew is amazed to see the interior. In the interior is a massive toroidal space generated by a glowing platform at the center, with multiple starships inside maintaining the field. Lieutenant Nilsson reports that some ships are made of neutronium alloy fibers, which he says has only been theoretical. Sylvia Tilly notes that some ships have organic hulls, while others have only holographic containment walls. Joanne Oweskun marvels at the size of one ship, the USS Constitution, which she speculates could carry a crew of 2,000. Detmer notes at least one ship has detached warp nanocells and wonders where its warp core is located, and Non spots a scout ship. The crew also spies a massive forested disc, which Tilly calls a flying rainforest, drawing laughter from the others. They spy the USS Voyager J and marvel that it is the 11th ship to carry that name. Elsewhere on the ship, Paul Stamets, Jet Reno, and dozens of other crew members also crowd around the windows in amazement. R.A. Bryce hails headquarters to report their arrival and is responded to with a scan. Detmer reports she has lost helm control, and Bryce reports that headquarters will dock Discovery remotely and has ordered Saru, Burnham, and Adiratal to beam over. Burnham surmises Starfleet scans were precise enough to recognize the tall symbiote. Saru leaves with the con to Nilsson, and the three beam directly over from the bridge. Guys, if nothing else, Discovery has some amazing, mind-blowing, eye-opening openings this season. I mean, this was just absolutely beautiful, Amy.
It definitely was. And seeing the new Starfleet headquarters and the energy and the shielding and oh my goodness. And just, it was so futuristic, but yet almost attainable. And okay, this is where we can go. I really love the design, how sleek and it just seemed to be streamlined. And that relationship between Saru and Michael just shining through right from the get-go.
Kevin, they were talking about organic starships. I didn't see Moya in it from Farscape in any of those docking things.
Yeah, if you're gonna throw out organic starship, at least do like a drive-by. Show some more detail there. And then like when they were saying the one without the attached nacelles, I was like, wait, where? Don't just tell us, show us. This is where I could have used one of those, Star Trek, the motion picture 10-minute fly arounds. That's what I could have used. That would have been really cool. This was a good opening scene with a lot of great visual effects. It was nice seeing the crew smile, even though you had a feeling it wasn't going to last, but still it was nice. And just, approaching this kind of protective bubble of Federation, which I thought was interesting. A good opening.
Hayley, visually stunning. But there's a lot of sciencey stuff just right in even the beginning of this episode. You must have been in overdrive effect at that point.
A little bit. It was really interesting and, again, visually beautiful. I do have to say, I don't think I would want to be aboard one of the ships that has holographic holes. I'm good.
Yeah, that's a little thank you.
Yeah.
You do your thing.
Organic material, that could be really, really interesting. Definitely a potential in the distant future. But again, that factors in a lot because is that organic material able to absorb radiation that's in space, or are you dying quickly because you're on the ship and really easily exposed to what's out there in space itself? I do have a interesting question that I will posit to you guys right now. Why do you think that Federation has decided to essentially be in space, just kind of occupying space rather than some random planet, asteroid, or moon.
So I'm going to say, because I don't think necessarily the Federation is as well liked as it used to be. And so I think there's a lot of people out there who think the Federation still knows some things and has some valuable things. So and they're a lot more of an easy target right now than they ever have been. But that's just my speculation. What do you think, Kevin?
I'm wondering if where they are, it allows them to be mobile. I'm not sure if their station moves or not, or how that works exactly, but that's a good question, Hayley. I like I said, I think they've lost a lot of allies, and stuff's different, and maybe they don't want to present themselves as a target on a planet that's easy to find. That's a possibility, but my guess is maybe because it's mobile. I don't know.
Well, and
yeah, I was thinking the same thing with the mobility, but I was like, well, if someone scans, it's easier to find a planet where this isn't a planet, so they're not gonna, be able to be found as easily, especially with that distortion.
But with that, though, we've already seen in Star Trek planets being masked by distortion fields alone. So one could posit that, they could still be on a planet and the ships be out in space and be able to hide both the planet and the ships. Because otherwise, you're beaming from one ship to the other, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth all the time. And that just seems counterproductive.
Yeah, I could see that. It's going to be interesting to see how some of this information plays out.
It's going to be interesting to find out how valuable the Discovery ship becomes now that dilithium is a rare thing and they have this jump drive thing.
Yeah, I think that's going to be huge going through the rest of the season. But let's move on to the first act of this episode. Saru, Burnham, and Adira marvel at the advanced facility, a gleaming white space inside the central platform. They are greeted by Admiral Charles Vance, Starfleet's commander-in-chief, and Lieutenant Audrey Willa, his chief security officer. Vance notes he has not seen a Kelpium in some time. Kaminar was last known to be status quo, he says, but is far enough away that little contact has been had with Kaminar and many other Federation planets since the burn. Saru is stunned to find that Kaminar has joined the Federation. Another officer interrupts to report that the USS Jehoga has reported Orion and Andorian vessels in a Sigma Draconis star system. It's the Emerald Chain, she says. Vance replies that Osira is quickly becoming more brazen. He orders regular updates on the situation. Vance turns back to Adira, who tells him that Senatal did not mean to keep Vance waiting, but he wished to remain on Earth a little longer to see snow one last time. Senna was always sentimental, Vance replies. But he also warns Adira that while he was familiar with Senatal, he is not familiar with her as the new host. He orders Willa to take Adira to a medical for a full diagnostic. Yet another officer interrupts to say that several Keeley refugees' situation is worsening and that their sickbay is overflowing, requiring triage in the corridors. The group looks over at a rail at multiple humanoid aliens lying in biobeds, and the officer reports that Dr. Eli, a hologram, has given them just hours to live. Misfolding proteins called prions are causing cascading nervous system failure in the Keeley, Burnham says. They cannot be treated until it is determined where they were infected, offering to analyze their travel roster. Vance replies that they are already researching their logs, dismissing Burnham's offer. Saru says Discovery is anxious to help the Federation, but Vance says they must be debriefed first. In Vance's office, Burnham explains their journey to the future and says early evidence indicates Discovery may have hit a pocket of abnormal gravity waves in the wormhole. She also confirmed she sent the Red Angel suit back into the wormhole to send a final signal to Spock before self-destructing, making their time travel one way as expected. They also explain how the Spear data included in 100,000 years of information collected over the entity's lifetime. Eli, who's been staring up close at Burnham and Saru during the meeting, interrupts to say Saru is the last known Kelpian to exhibit biochemical traces of Bahare, and that Burnham may be prone to emotional exaggeration. Vance notes that AI has improved greatly in the past 930 years, and Eli says his primarily diagnostic scanners can detect anomalies as small as aberrant protein coding in your neurons, so you can't lie to me. Vance dismisses Eli, who disappears. Vance reveals that they're aware of just 38 member worlds remaining in the Federation, down from 350 at its peak, though he expresses hope that more worlds remain members but are simply out of reach since subspace relays fell into disrepair or were destroyed in the wake of the burn. The facility represents both Starfleet headquarters and the entire Federation's civilian government. Burnham begins to ask about the burn, but Vance cuts her off, saying he is not at liberty to discuss intelligence with her yet. He notes that there are not historical records to confirm their story. Vance says much of the 30th century was spent fighting a war to uphold the temporal accords, which outlawed time travel, making Discovery's mere presence in 3189 a crime. Saru and Burnham protest, saying that traveling to the future was the only way to ensure control could not destroy all sentient life in the galaxy. Vance says if that were true, he would be grateful, but that trusting them without evidence is too great a risk. He plans to study Discovery for retrofit and says the crew may be assigned elsewhere, alarming Saru and Burnham. Back in Saru's ready room, Burnham argues that there is no crew with the experience of Discovery, nor is anyone else capable of operating the spore drive. Saru agrees, but says they must carry out Vance's orders as Starfleet officers. Desperate, Burnham says Discovery could prove its worth by figuring out where the Keeley picked up the infectious protein and curing them. Saru says Discovery is in a position to help, but they must request the necessary roster via proper channels, as he does not wish the ship's first act to be violating a direct order. In the shuttle bay, the assembled crew is disturbed to hear Starfleet may break them up, but Saru asks them to trust the process. Each crew member is interviewed by holographic Starfleet officers. One listens to Hugh Colbert's story about dying and being resurrected in the mycelial network. Reno explains to another how she was rescued from the USS Hiawatha by Burnham and Captain Christopher Pike, and asks for a snack. While Reno munches on chips and salsa, the officer asks about the Emerald Chain. Reno asks if it's some sort of Risson party drug, but the officer replies that it's the Andorian Orion Syndicate. Reno says she's never heard of it. Separately, Stamets is affronted when he is asked if he is essential personnel. Meanwhile, Tilly discusses getting her hair blown out and becoming a Terran captain / dominatrix in the mirror universe. And Non is shown refusing to tell her interview more than her name, rank, serial number, and assignment. At Federation headquarters, Saru and Burnham ask Willa to share the roster of planets the Keeley refugees had visited. She brushes them off. Burnham notes that the spore drive allows the Discovery to travel great distances instantaneously, and that sharing the roster will either save lives or allow Willa to hate Discovery a little more for wasting your time. In a holding cell, two holographic officers tell Philippa Georgiou that their scans immediately detected her as a Terran. Georgiou, however, only stares at an older human male standing nearby wearing a suit and Starfleet badge. The holograms interrogate her, revealing that in the prior centuries they had discovered a chemetric strain on the subatomic level in Terran stem cells. Georgiou responds that they cannot rile her by adding a completely fabricated biological component to her nastiness and inherent bad behavior, insisting that she is extremely wicked even for a Terran. Suddenly, the holograms begin to malfunction and go offline. Georgiou reveals to the man she blinked at the harmonic rate to disrupt the protocols, creating a reference loop and shut them down. She asks why he wears glasses. He responds to make him look smarter. In the headquarters sickbay, the Keeley are worsening quickly. Saru and Burnham tell Vance that they believe the refugees became sick on Urna, a planet deserted for centuries. Saru says it used to be an industrial hub used to process unstable metals. And Burnham says that in their time, the Federation was just learning about its toxicity. A thinning atmosphere and high concentrations of UVB radiation was expected to mutate the indigenous biosphere. I'll get this right yet. The Keeley must have eaten infected plants scavenged on Urna. Eli says the only way to create an antidote would be to obtain a healthy protein sample of the plant they ingested, but since the entire plant has been irradiated, that was no longer possible. Burnham remembers that in the 23rd century, the Federation had a seed vault ship that the USS Tikov would have pristine samples aboard. The Tikov still exists, but would take 5 months to reach. Burnham says Discovery can spore drive there and get back in time to save the refugees, but Vance orders Willa to study the ship's specs and train a Federation team to pilot the vessel. Burnham protests that Vance is wasting time by teaching a new crew how to pilot an ancient vessel with an unusual new propulsion system, and he tells her to watch her tone. Saru convinces Vance to allow the crew to remain and Burnham to command the mission while he stays behind at Federation headquarters to build trust. Willa and two security officers will accompany Burnham. I'm tired, guys, but a lot happened in that first act and so much to go over. I don't really know where you want to start. So, Hayley, I'm going to start with you, and you kind of pick where you would like to go.
Did you guys bring snacks?
I have a water supply and a salad.
No, this was a really well done opening because I was a little apprehensive watching the sneak peek in last week's episode. I'm like, oh crap, we're gonna have like a bad roll. And then in this opening, when Burnham and Saru are talking, and she says that she's got everything ready to transfer over, I was like, don't do it just yet because you really don't know if you should trust, even though it's Starfleet and it's Federation headquarters. You really don't know if you should trust them, just as much as they don't really know if they can trust the Discovery crew. And so I was a little apprehensive about that. But I'm still a little apprehensive after the entire episode. So we'll have to see where this goes. But it's really interesting to hear some of, how clearly the Federation doesn't know about some of this stuff. I get them not knowing about Discovery. I get them not knowing about what happened with Burnham and the Red Angel suit and all that because it was ordered to be wiped and no one was going to talk about it. We already know that from season 2 of Discovery. So that I can understand, but this whole not knowing about Erna, it doesn't make any sense. If you still have access to most, if not all of your records and all your history and all the progress that was made and then the steps backwards because of the burn and everything, doesn't make sense that they wouldn't know that Erna was radiated and the Discovery crew had to explain that. So that just seemed a little weird to me. But it's really neat to know that there was 350 planets in the Federation. That is fantastic and super exciting. And you have to wonder about how many different species we've encountered in iterations of Star Trek up to this point had joined. And so that's really exciting to hear about that. The interviews were fantastic. Nan's was my favorite because much like a military officer today, if they are captured, they do not give anything other than their name and their rank and their job repeatedly. And that was really wonderful to see that they actually used that in this episode. But Jet Reno was hilarious, and I'm really intrigued to know what happened to Giorgio. Even though that's later in the episode, I want to know what he exactly did to her that made her kind of break a little.
Mr. Reitzel, so much going on, but I have to say too, one of my favorite moments maybe ever in Discovery is Giorgio and the holographic AI.
Yeah, Giorgio broke the holographic AI. I love that. That was great. That actually was my favorite scene in the whole episode and one of my favorite scenes thus far in this season. But more, not specifically the scene where she's messing with the AI. I love the interaction between her and Kovich, played by legendary director David Cronenberg. And I was like, why does that guy look familiar? And I realized he's legendary director David Cronenberg. For those of you that don't know who Cronenberg is, directed Scanners, Videodrome, The Fly, Dead Ringers, Naked Lunch, Crash, Extenses. One of my favorites, History of Violence, Eastern Promises, Dangerous Method, and recently Cosmopolitus. This guy is a legend. For me personally, he's hit or miss when it comes to directing, but he's one of those directors that a lot of people who are cinephiles and love movies love his style in storytelling. But he has some acting under his belt, which I really wasn't aware of until I saw him do this. Decided to go back and look, realize he's done quite a bit of episodic television. He did a 2-part stint on one of my favorite series back in the early 2000s, Alias. So it was really cool because I liked how he was just basically calling Giorgio on her stuff, and I could tell she was kind of enjoying this and respecting it a little bit too. But I just, that was just wonderful writing and 2 great characters working with each other or against each other, depending on how you want to look at it. I loved that scene.
That was a sight.
Hayley,
I was going to say he's a psychologist. That's why he was calling her out on her stuff and he could see her for what she was. Outside of the fact that they knew she was Terran. Very interesting.
That's why I wear these glasses, because they make me look smart.
Kevin, real quick, we had one other big guest star in this week's episode as well. Mr. Oded Fehr.
Yeah, my mummy man crush. This guy is legendary, and for Highlander fans, I would love to have him be part of the Highlander remake, maybe as Ramirez or something like this. But this guy's been in so much stuff. Of course, the Mummy films, in Resident Evil films, and he's just he's one of those actors that looks cool all the time. He acts cool all the time. He's good looking. He's got a good presence about himself, and I was excited to see him in Star Trek.
And I think it's good casting for his character because he makes that character. You're not quite sure, is he on the side of the angels or is he on the side of the not so angel type? Is he a Badmiral, as we would say? Amy Nelson, lots of stuff to talk about.
Yes, definitely. And one thing, just sort of going around the whole Vance and Willett, I was wondering, are they coming across as too standoffish? I get that they're suspicious, but what I love about, I guess, how he's acting it is that you can really feel how much he's trying to trust them, but then still mitigate the risks. And he doesn't make assumptions, which I absolutely love because he listens to their stories. And then he says, well, the records show that the Discovery was destroyed. So there are two truths that exist, and that is problematic. He doesn't say there are two truths and your story must be wrong. He just says that it's problematic. And even though that Discovery is there, and he says, just you being here is a crime, like they're already breaking the rules, he still doesn't just jump to that assumption. He's willing to keep an open mind, listen to what they have to offer, and at least give them a chance to earn their trust. And I think that that's really good that we see that because it feels like they're just so standoffish. I really like also when Saru is talking to the crew and to Burnham, that we must trust the process. And I love that. I have had to trust many processes just personally in my life. So when I heard that really resonated with me. But I think Discovery did a real good job. The actors, the writing, that it's showing the anxiety and really testing the Discovery crew. How deep is your loyalty and your commitment to the ideas of Starfleet, which I think is taking a really big leap of faith that the Federation of Planets of now this 38-member federation is the Starfleet philosophy ideals. Is it still the same? Are they equivalent? And so for them to trust the process being 900 years in the future, and does being in Starfleet mean the same thing? Or has it gone through different iterations and now Starfleet is like the Terran But so I think that is, to me, just really resonated. And I really, really liked seeing that. And then my question for this act is, again, they can, as Hayley was saying, they can recognize Georgiou as Terran, and they're just going to make up, well, as Georgiou says, make up this stem cell, and that there's some kind of difference in me. I don't know why that was needed, other than to just tell the Terran story. But I'm with you, Hayley. That's questionable to me.
A couple things I pulled from this section. I think it was a really good contrast to have Burnham and Saru in this case, because here you have Saru who's ready to take this leap of faith, it seems like, and just, it's Starfleet, we just follow the process. And you have Burnham who's already been in this world for a year. So she has some experience in this timeline, in this world, and she's questioning some things. And I think in this case, it's good you have somebody questioning some things. It's not Burnham being insubordinate or Burnham trying to show anybody up. She's just like, whoa, wait a minute. I do have a little bit of experience in this time already. So, let's not just dive into everything 100% Starfleet. But I know this too. This is something that kind of bugged me right out from the get-go. You have all these long-range communication arrays that aren't working, and you have a ship that can jump to each of them. You're going on repair duty for a little while to get all these working again. I mean, that just seemed like the first thing that popped in my mind. But there were so many fun things in this. I love the scenes with the interviews, especially Jet Reno's. I need a snack. I'm kind of hungry. I'm going to need a drink too. So
and there was reference to like a Ryzen hallucinogenic drug or something like that.
It was
party
great.
drug or something.
It was great. But let's continue on. Miss Nelson, would you care to read Act 2 for us?
Yes. With Burnham in command, Discovery undocks and moves to a safe distance from the headquarters. Willa questions whether the ship can really do what Burnham has promised, drawing skeptical looks from the bridge crew. Discovery has 3 hours to obtain the seeds and synthesize the antidote. Burnham orders black alert, and the ship jumps away. Hold on. It arrives just outside an ion storm, and they speculate the Tikhov is inside and must be retrieved. As it approaches, Discovery is hit by an energy blast, draining the shields to 90%. Owesicon locates the Tikhov. Its warp drive is offline, and the ship is running on auxiliary power. Some sort of radiation is interfering with Discovery's scans, and she cannot tell if any life signs are aboard. Discovery is rocked by a second wave, and Reese says the ship is not steady enough to deploy tractor beams on the Tikhov. Detmer momentarily panics, but Owo reassures her. Detmer deploys reverse thrusters to get Discovery clear, and Reese is finally able to secure the Tikhov in a tractor beam. Owo praises Detmer, reports that the radiation is not ionizing and so should not pose a health risk, but that something about it is odd. Tilly begins analyzing the radiation. Colbert arrives on the bridge, and Burnham tells him that there may be a medical emergency aboard the Tikhov. For 500 years, each Federation planet has taken a turn maintaining the ship. Burnham is surprised to find that the current caretakers are Barzan, which intrigues Non. Willa tells her that Barzan joined the Federation in the 25th century. Non replies that she had not seen another Barzan since joining Starfleet, and Burnham tells her to join the away team. The air on the ship is breathable to Barzans, Burnham notes, meaning she and Colbert will need breathing apparatuses while Non can go without hers. The vault can only be accessed by beaming in. Burnham, Colbert, and Non beam aboard the Tikhov and are astonished to find plants growing everywhere. The seed vault must have been compromised, Burnham speculates. The ship is supposed to be crewed by 2 scientists and their 2 children, but residual radiation is interfering with their tricorders, making it difficult to locate them. As they search for the vault, a distortion follows close behind. Back in the interrogation room, the unnamed older man says that Giorgio is curious about his badge. He gives it to her, and she smashes it with the heel of her boot and plays with its parts. The man, who frequently adjusts his glasses, questions why is she traveling with Discovery. He reveals his birth date is April 5th, the anniversary of Earth's first contact with the Vulcans. A Terran holy day, Giorgio says. He notes that in the Terran universe, humans slaughtered the Vulcans, and that he has been interested in the mirror universe since he was a boy. Giorgio agrees Terrans mostly act without pesky motivations, though she says they do like revenge. She offers to answer his questions if he answers hers, but he rejects her, saying she would not actually comply or would lie. Giorgio questions who is really in charge following the burn and asks who was responsible. The man says there are conflicting theories, but no hard proof for any of them. Giorgio says the burn set the Federation back a step, but the man retorts that it has endured unlike the Terran Empire, which he says fell long ago. He also says the distance between the 2 universes started expanding after her departure, and that there has not been a crossing in 500 years, meaning Giorgio is all alone. The man surmises that there is a person on Discovery's crew that Giorgio cares about, explaining why Giorgio has remained aboard. On the tick-off, the away team finds the family's living quarters where the holographic projection shows them playing a game. The mother hums to one child, and Burnham recognizes the tune as the lullaby, played by Adira on the cello, which had been played by Senatal's parents when he was a boy. Burnham beams into the vault while Colbert and Non, mesmerized by the holographic recording, says she wished she could have gone home before they traveled to the future. Barzan's poverty meant they invested in their children, she tells Colbert. He says her family must have been proud when she joined Starfleet, but she says they were devastated and can only imagine their reaction to her supposed death. Colbert goes back to check on Burnham, leaving Non to search their logs. She finds an entry in which the distressed father, Dr. Addis, says he cannot get out of the ion storm and that he cannot identify the light that hurt them. He speculates that the vault may contain a cure, and the log ends, but Non notices he is distorted strangely in the recording. Colbert calls Non to another room where they discover stasis pods holding the mother and 2 children. Despite being in cryostasis, Colbert notes all 3 are dead. Non deduces that Addis is still alive and trying to save them by finding a cure in the vault, explaining the plants all over the ship. Inside the vault, Burnham is unable to provide a verbal code to access the seeds. Suddenly, Addis appears and fights her to protect the seeds, but then disappears.
So interesting things here, but I gotta just say quick. When they get on the ship and you see all the plant life, I just went back to that Lower Decks episode from this past season of Lower Decks. I was like that's where my brain instantly went. I'm like, oh, Discovery's stealing from Lower Decks. But there was a lot of interesting things here. I really like the insight we got into Nam's character and a lot of things going on there. Some interesting things as far as the history behind her race and obviously what they were doing on this ship. So a lot of interesting things. Hayley, what did you think of what they did in this segment?
I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really quite fascinating. So this concept of a seed vault ship is really cool because we actually have seed vaults on Earth as it is. And they are storing different plant lives and seeds from different plants that we currently have on our planet that have become extinct. And they're actually kind of threatened because of climate change because they have to be where it's super, super cold. So space is really, really cold. So I can imagine that the ship might actually be pretty cold inside to keep these plants safe, these seeds. But I thought that sequence was really, really powerful and really beautiful at the same time. And hearing more about Barzans was really fun because we only get a Barzan in TNG's The Price. And we don't know enough about them. So I thought that was a really nice touch to kind of learn more about them and to see Nan's character kind of change from this stoic security officer to lighting up a little bit. Was really beautiful.
What did you think of what we saw, Kevin? And are you hungry for a salad?
I'm sorry, there's too much techno babble in this part. My eyes were kind of glossing over. I was looking at like their cool like vests with lights on and checking out their costumes and stuff. I was getting, it was nice to see, that they're Barzan, is that what you call them?
Mm-hmm.
It was nice to, get a little background that they joined the Federation, and that was a surprise to her. So that was interesting. It was, to me, that was more about, the character of Discovery and learning more about her, and especially where it was going. I just did want to mention, though, that I loved Giorgio when she said Vulcans need to stay in their lane. Thought that was good. Visually, it was very, very cool, but I got to tell you, I kind of tuned out when it came to all the sciencey, talky stuff. I was just like, okay, whatever. See, Space Seed? Are we going to see Khan? I don't know.
Wrong ones, Kevin. Wrong ones.
I know. But I was just like, I feel like I'm not a science person when it comes to all this. So that's why we have you here, Hayley. But I just wish they would just kind of dumb it down a little bit, and just, too much technobabble. Sometimes my eyes just start to glaze over.
Well, we'll try not to bore the rest of the crew with technobabble. But Amy, what did you think of what happened in this segment? Because I thought this was kind of a different segment for Discovery than we've maybe seen in a long time. Where it really focused, especially on Non, with how rapidly her character changed just being around members of her own species.
And one thing that really stood out for me was when Culber asked Non, when was the last time you heard your native tongue or language or whatever he said? And that to me is so powerful, in part because I just went to a training for ELL. I'm a teacher, and so English language learners. And so all of this of, recognizing the diversity and helping students who are not only learning math, but also learning a language. So that was just fresh in my mind. And then to hear Culber ask, and just that recognition of who you are and your culture, so powerful. I loved that moment. I like this whole season, in part because I said it's episodic, but another reason is that the stakes in this episode are not enormous, right? The stakes are so doable. We're going to go to this ship. Oh, it's in peril. It's in this ion storm. Let's pull it out. Let's get the seeds. Let's get the antidote and take it back. Like, the end of the universe isn't going to fall and happen if we fail. And so to have it just is such a nice pace, such a nice feeling. It's very doable. I think it's great, and I like seeing it. And I think that is also another difference between this episode and previous seasons and this season altogether. A couple other things. April 5th, I just have to say kudos to bringing that in to First Contact Day, and it made my Star Trek heart happy. And I'm just going to throw it out there right now. This is now, Burnham is picking up on this lullaby. I'm sorry, the first thing that I thought of was BSG, Kara Thrace. Do you remember at the end? And she had to put together from the kid that was, it's been a while, listeners. I do apologize. But Starbuck recognized this melody in BSG, and that's what I was thinking. I'm wondering if this lullaby, because it's being known across the universe, has something to do with the future. I don't know. I don't know where it leads, but I'm thinking that's important.
Yeah, I think that was the first time I felt like, oh, okay, Discovery, you're truly revealing your first clue for your overarching arc of the season. So I think that was a good pickup there, Amy. Yes, Hayley.
So just to give you guys something to ponder, there are 1,700 seed banks dotted around the world, meant to preserve the genes that code our essential crops for resistance to diseases, pests, and climate change.
Interesting.
When you put it that way, that sounds really important.
It is. It really, really is. So,
I mean, you want to be able to preserve stuff to grow in the future, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Wait, just leave it to Science Officer Stoddard to put it in a way we can all really know its true importance.
Yeah. Thank you for helping me with not feeling dumb.
Oh, you're welcome. Always here for that.
The more you know. Well, speaking of which, Science Officer Stoddard, would you read Act 3 for us, please?
Outside the vault, Burnham tells the others that it was as if his body was out of phase. Non reports seeing that in his log. Culber says grief appears to have caused Addis to disconnect from the reality that his family is dead. But Non says Barzons think about death differently than humans, meaning his behavior may be logical. Ultimately, Burnham notes they need his voice authorization to obtain the Urna seeds. Burnham postulates that his phasing may be why he survived when his family did not. Aboard Discovery, Stamets, Reno, and Tilly are nearly done studying the radiation. Willa notes the three do not have a particularly professional relationship. Burnham contacts them to report that Addis reported seeing a bright light, that the family's bodies have high concentrations of beta particles, and that Addis is phasing uncontrollably. The trio quickly surmised that the Tikov was hit by a coronal mass ejection from a nearby star. The massive radioactive proton storm would have been deadly, but they conclude Addis had been beaming into the vault at the time, and the CME interfered with the ship's magnetic shielding and destabilized his body's polarization on a quantum level. Tilly reports she believes she can bring him back into phase. They cut power to the stasis pods, drawing Addis out, and catch him in a transporter beam that brings him back into phase inside the seed vault. Willa tells Stamets, Reno, and Tilly that despite their dysfunction, they make a good team, though Stamets and Reno disagree about whether they have accepted the dysfunction. Non tells Addis that they are not trying to stop his search for a cure, just to obtain the urn of seeds, but Addis is unresponsive. Culber tells Burnham that she needs to make it clear to him that his family is dead, and that he is in danger without getting help soon. Burnham tells him bluntly that his family is gone, and that he knows there is nothing he can do to change that, but that the seeds could help the Keeley. Tearful, Addis stands and enters his code, Ama Tolpra. Nan says they are the most beautiful moons in the Barzan system. Addis replies they are also his dead daughter's names. Nan withdraws the urn of seeds. Burnham prepares to beam Addis to the Discovery sickbay, but he refuses to leave. Culber warns him that he was irradiated by the CME and that his internal organs have been damaged, necessitating treatment. Outside the vault, Culber says he is acting irrationally and that he is endangering the Tikov and the living history of the Federation that it contains. Burnham sends Culber and the seeds back to Discovery to begin work on the antidote. She tells Nan that she respects Addis's personal decision, but that Starfleet has its own needs and that sometimes there is no good choice, only what you can live with. Then, Nan volunteers to remain behind.
Oh. Very interesting act, but I just got to say this. If they're not going to give him a full episode of Discovery, I need a Trek short with Jet, Stamets, and Tilly all together. I think they should have their own full episode of just the three of them, but I could watch that grouping for hours and just be completely entertained. But a lot of interesting... Yeah, well, you know, a lot of interesting things here, and I find it very interesting. I found this an interesting twist at the end. I want to know what you guys think, where Burnham has to now kind of toe the Starfleet line like Saru did earlier in the episode to keep this seed bank from not being destroyed because Addis has kind of lost it and everything like that. So I think it was an interesting twist there where Burnham's now having to follow the rule of Starfleet. Amy, what did you think of that and the other things that happened in this act?
Well, that's a question. Your question sort of leads me to my question in where is Burnham mentally? Like, I know that Culber is trying to help, but he keeps advocating for her to do things. Like last week, right? He was the one who suggested that Burnham go with Adira to the Trill homeworld. And now we've got Culber suggesting you're the one that has to go talk to Dr. Addis. Like, he's pushing her. Is it maybe to get her more into the role and feeling of you are a Starfleet officer, you are in charge of missions, and to not have the thing that she was talking about with Saru, if we could just get our hands on the roster, like, what do you mean we can get our hands on? We will ask for it through proper channels because that's what Starfleet does. And so is Culber like somehow recognizing that he's pushing her towards this to help her in this, as we talked about, this growth spurt that she's had because of the trauma? So I picked up on that. I'm seeing that theme. And so if Dr. Culber is doing that on purpose, then kudos to him.
Real quick, Amy, I think the reason why he's doing that, at least this is my personal opinion, because he knows as much as Saru is the captain and kind of the level head of Discovery, Burnham is the heart of the crew, because the crew really goes to her when things get emotional and they need that emotional support. It comes from Burnham, and I think that's why he's pushing her so hard to kind of work through what she's doing, because he knows that she is kind of more the emotional heart of Discovery than Saru or anybody else except maybe Tilly, but that she's kind of the centering presence for emotion on Discovery.
Yeah. Hayley, did you want to jump in?
No, keep going.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Okay. I just have one last thing. When seeing Dr. Addis phase and they were talking about, he's out of phase. Of course, next gen, the next phase with LaForge and Roe, and that whole episode popped into my mind as well. Gotta love the TNG.
Love that episode so much. Love it.
Yep.
Hayley?
So I was just, no one could see me, but I was nodding with what Amy was saying. I do think that Dr. Culber is pushing Burnham because, if we bounce off of last week's episode discussing mental health, she might still be strong, but she is experiencing this disconnect because on one hand, she's been off on her own for a year, not following Starfleet regulations because she couldn't. But then at the same time, to her core, she is still a Starfleet officer. And I think he's trying to get her to recognize whether it is that she wants to continue being a Starfleet officer or if she wants to go this route and be a courier and be with Book. And so I think that's why he's pushing her to do these things, because they're Starfleet roles. And he wants her to recognize and make that decision on what she's going to do. Because to me, it seems like since she came back, she is waffling. She's on the fence. She's not sure what she wants to do. And she's even admitted that herself, essentially, that she's not sure where she's at. And so I think that's what he's doing. And, sometimes counselors, that's what they do. They push people one way because if that's really what they want to do and that's the direction they want to go, they're going to continue it on their own. And if it's not, it's getting them to recognize that's not the direction I want to go. I want to go this way instead. And so I think that's really spot on of what he's doing. I loved the scene with Stamets and Tilly Reno. I thought that was fantastic. The humor was just right. It wasn't too much. It was just perfect. I will say it's really interesting that Willa didn't know what a CME is. I feel like even though we're well in advance in the future, there's still CMEs because they're still stars. It still happens. And even if you're not a science officer, you're still on board of a ship out in space where you could be exposed to a CME. I feel like that would be in the basic handbooks being a Starfleet officer. So that really just kind of was like, that doesn't make any sense.
What was it? What was the CME
It's a coronal
again?
mass ejection. So I'll get your science here lesson again. So our sun has CMEs as well. And essentially what that is you get a buildup of gas kind of under plasma from the sun's outer core, outer shell. And it builds up and it builds up. And eventually that pocket will break and it bursts. And they call it a coronal mass ejection. And it shoots out radiation from the sun in whatever direction. Sometimes they actually come towards Earth. If they're bad enough, they can interfere with satellites. They can affect phones and things like that. But that's what gives us our aurora.
Are you talking about solar flares?
They're kind of like that, but they're a lot bigger. It's a okay. bigger event. Essentially, if there was one big enough that came in the direction of Earth, it could blow off a lot of our atmosphere. It could blow off our atmosphere, but it would mess with satellites. It would take out a lot of stuff. We wouldn't have cell phones. We wouldn't have anything that relies on the satellites that are floating around our planet because it would affect that.
In other words, Kevin, at the end of the episode, there's going to be a pop quiz.
No, I just realized there was a reason why. I just realized when I was younger, there was a reason why I watched Wheel of Fortune instead of Jeopardy.
Well, believe it or not, Jeopardy might be a subject before we leave the show today. But Mr. Reitzel, what are your thoughts on what we've seen so far in Act 3?
I'm just going to comment on one thing. Am I the only one not buying this whole thing where all of a sudden she just wants to stay and leave the Discovery crew? Not that I'm buying that her character wants to, I guess, but maybe I'm doubting that writing choice a little bit. I'm sorry. You've gone almost 1,000 years in the future. You made a choice to stay with Discovery. I mean, if I did this and I came across some people that grew up on my home street, I'd go, awesome, dude. What's it look like now? I'm not going to stay with you. I'm just going to stay with my ship. I'm sorry. I'm not buying this. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I know this is emotional. I know you're away from home for so long and these are your people, but come on. What is Discovery to you? That irked me. I'm sorry.
You know, I kind of agree with you a little bit on this, Kevin, because she was a security officer. She was the military, by the book, everything like that. If she would have been like a science officer or something else, I could have rolled with it.
But she went to bat for Discovery. Discovery went to bat for her. And I'm talking about the crew and the people she's doing with. I mean, there's not, okay, let me put it this way. There is not enough that I saw there other than a tear here and her feeling for someone that's part of her race. Not enough to make a huge decision like that. Maybe a story arc to build up something more or a relationship build. But come on. Not buying it. Sorry.
I think
Dr. Addis is single now.
that's true. But I think the one part of it that in some way justifies it too is not only because of the connection with her race, obviously, but because of her dedication to Starfleet too, to protect these seeds as a security officer. But I agree. I think it was too rapid in one episode to have such a change in a character who's been so the security officer and so military.
It was too convenient, and it makes me wonder. Like, wait a minute, did they just bring her on for 4 or 5 episodes and then she's gone? Is this a convenient way to write her off? I don't get it.
I don't
Hayley?
think that she's necessarily gone for good. If we think about it this way, the Tikoff, the Dr. Addis is got to pass off control of the seed vault to somebody because someone's always got to take care of it. So there has to be some way that they're going to work this story in because they're not just going to let them just go back to Barzan and stay there and the Tikoff is going to stay there and the seed vault's going to stay there. So I don't think necessarily that her character is off the show. I just think that she is going to help him return home to Barzan and kind of help take care of the seed vault and potentially maybe be the next person to take over until they can figure out a way that maybe they can transfer the seed vault to either another ship or somehow into Starfleet headquarters so that it's a permanent staple so that it's not just on a ship floating out in space where it could be attacked and everything can be destroyed. So I think that's where that will go. I get the frustration. I thought it was a little silly that she was going to stay, but then I thought, okay, somehow this is going to play into later episodes because I can't imagine that they're only going to use the Tikoff and the seed vault once.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for sure. Mr. Wright, would you care to close us out for the episode with Act 4?
Of course. Burnham tells Non staying would mean giving up her career. Non says that considering what she did to Arium, she is good here and will make sure Addis' family returns home for a proper burial and that the Barzans watch over the Tikoff is completely successful. She expresses happiness at a chance to see her homeworld again and reminds Burnham of her ranks at Burnham's remarks at Ariman's funeral, and that one of the reasons we joined Starfleet is to reach the best in ourselves and each other. Non says that she has never seen anyone reach for the best in others like Burnham and urges her to never stop. They tearfully embrace and say they hope to see each other again someday. Burnham beams back to Discovery, and Non watches from a window as the ship jumps away. Back at Federation headquarters, Burnham reports on the successful mission. Saru says Discovery stands ready for further assignments, but Vance warns that exploratory missions are now an unaffordable luxury. Saru tells Vance about the Dark Ages, a time before the Renaissance when humanity was plagued by war and disease. But an artist named Giotto helped launch the Renaissance by discovering three-point perspective the technique used in two-dimensional art to represent three-dimensional depth. That inspired humans, Saru says, and Discovery's unique perspective could help the Federation of 3189 to look up at the stars. Vance admits that they have been in triage for a long time and that Burnham urges him to keep Discovery together with its crew. Vance warns that they have not yet dealt with the trauma of time travel, noting particularly that Detmer is unstable. But Burnham says she trusts her. Vance relents, but says Discovery will go where he says when he orders it. Saru and Burnham acknowledge his demands. Burnham asked about the burn, but Vance says that there is not enough data to support any theory about its origin and says the Federation has more immediate concerns. Burnham understands and accepts the challenge. In sickbay, Culber gives the Keeley the antidote. Burnham asked Willa about the music she heard aboard the Teacock. Willa replies that she and around half the people at headquarters knew some version. Burnham questions how Addis, too far from Federation headquarters to have traveled there before, and know that the same song as so many others. On Discovery, Burnham runs into Giorgio in the corridor and finds her standing unresponsive. After prompting her several times, Giorgio finally responds and brushes off Burnham's concerns, but looks worried as she walks away. Later, Burnham and Saru stare out the window. The new Federation of the future does not yet feel like home, she admits, but she hopes it will eventually. She adds that the Federation is its people and that she cannot separate them anymore, instead seeing one living organism, as Saru states. He also admonishes her to speak to Vance more carefully going forward. Saru says there is still much they do not know, but that they are both looking up.
So an interesting closeout to this week's episode, because we see now Saru is maybe not fully trusting everything he's being told by Vance at the end of the episode. Also too, there's a few things that stand out to me. Obviously we have whatever's going on with Giorgio. I think one of the things that they bring up in this act too is the connection Non had to Ariam, which was actually kind of a key point in that episode when Ariam does get killed in season 2. And I think that does help motivate Non's actions. Again, I think it just seems rapid for the time frame that they've been put in, but at least it's a little bit more of an explanation. I don't know. Vance is kind of still putting off some bad Admiral vibes here, so I'm not quite sure. Hayley, what did you think of the closeout to the episode?
It was really interesting, and I would agree with you that I'm not quite sure what I think about Vance. I do think that he has potentially been in charge for a while and has seen a lot of things. Obviously, he knew Senna Tall, and that we know Senna died like 12 years ago. So this could be really interesting from his perspective, just because it's Discovery's new, and now they have this possibility, and what could he do with that? And so I'm sure he's weighing this idea of how much to use Discovery, but at the same time afraid because he just doesn't know them yet. And I think there's a lot of trust that has to be built between Discovery crew and this new Federation that we're encountering, and Vance in particular. So I'm intrigued to see what goes on with his character, because I don't know if I trust him yet either. But I will say his notion that, he says we have more theories than ships. So clearly no one knows why the burn happened, and there's more ideas of how it happened and why it happened and who did it than ships in Starfleet. And that's kind of scary because Burnham notes about that. She kind of mentions, all right, that challenge accepted to figure this out. So I don't know.
Quick question. How long ago from this 3189 that they've arrived did the burn happen? How long
120
ago?
years, I think, is what he said.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking that between 120 and 150.
Yeah. All I know is Mr. Reitzel, I know you actually know the truth behind the burn, and you're just not saying.
I was trying to figure out I don't know, maybe if this is a good time to bring it up, but I just want to mention on this particular scene though, with with Burnham and Saru. I'll mention my other thought later, but what we're getting right now is the early stages of Saru definitely being the captain and in charge, and Burnham being basically the number one. And I'm liking this little beginning of this command structure that they're both getting used to, and that Saru had to remind her of her tact. And I think that that's very important because she kind of jumped on Vance a little bit there, and and he's like, basically, mind your place or your tone, or however it was that he did it. And I thought that was really cool that Saru said that because, yes, she's been there for a year. And, she doesn't want just like everyone else, they don't want to break up the crew, and that we were helpful and stuff like that. But there's certain ways you have to go about asking for things from people she has to remember, he's an admiral. And what's interesting too, is that I love that Saru recognizing still the command structure, because he's a captain, he's an admiral, and that he asked for permission, that I would stay here, and that the crew can do this, and that he vouched for Burnham, and that this is her specialty and stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool that was done. We're supposed to not really trust what's going on. I know this is a with Vance, and the Federation is it's hard to tell if they're just sustaining themselves or if they're really trying to develop more people to join back up with them. That's the big question. Are they just trying to, stay what they are now and not lose any more allies? Or are they actually, they mentioned like they don't have 5-year missions anymore, so exploration is not really a thing anymore. Well, if you don't explore and meet new cultures and new worlds, then you don't get them to join the Federation and make what the Federation is. So it feels like they're kind of a patchwork right now. They filled up all the holes in the dam, so to speak, but it doesn't feel like they're trying to get out of their protective bubble to strengthen themselves. So that's what I
well, and that's, he says it, that they've been in triage mode. And so I think that's still where they're at. They are in triage mode, but then they're also in fight mode, because they've got this emerald chain, and I'm very intrigued as to like exactly, besides, this Orion Andorian syndicate, what this is. And so, on the one hand, I'm sure they're trying to do what they can, but with no dilithium or limited dilithium, they can't get very far. And then they're trying to fight this emerald chain at the same time that they're trying to heal. And so they're getting pulled from a lot of different angles. And I can imagine that would make it really difficult to be the Starfleet that we've recognized up until this point. So that's where I take that is just because of that. One thing I do want to ask you guys, do we know for sure that he's an admiral? I mean, I know we're saying admiral, but when he introduces himself, he says he's Commander Vance.
I could be wrong.
Well, I'm calling him Admiral Vance.
I just knew that he was in charge, and that Saru was respecting the rank, whatever it is that he has. So I don't remember, actually. It's a good question.
And IMDb Oded Fierce character is named Admiral Charles Vance.
Okay.
So, anybody else have any thoughts on this closing? Amy?
Yeah, going off with what you said, Kevin, the whole Saru and how he's developing in relationship to Burnham, and their characters are really growing. I feel, especially in this last act, that Saru is becoming a very good captain, and I was sort of opposed to him becoming a captain. I didn't want to see him, but he really sold me in this act. He is an amazing diplomat. He's inspired to tell this story and this so that we can see where we are in relation to this artwork, and to be looking up, like, how inspirational is that? He's definitely now the one in charge, like you're saying, and how that power relationship with Burnham is showing, because she's like the heart of the crew and Saru is the head of the crew. Like, he's the captain, he's in charge, he's the thoughtful, premeditative, let's do this the right way. And then we've got Burnham with the action. And I think you're right. She's going to be like this, the number one, how it was in TNG. Like, the number one goes on missions and does all the away stuff and to protect the captain. So I'm interested to see if that's really how it's going to play out. I think it's great. My question to you, Giorgio, it leaves us with Burnham. Giorgio, what's going on? What's wrong with you? And she snaps out of it. And I don't think that she looks worried when she's walking away. I don't know what that look is, but I don't think that Giorgio is worried at all. But that's just me. But when I first watched this, I thought, you know what? That guy with the glasses hypnotized her and did something that he's going to be able to trigger some kind of response from her. And I just think because right from the get-go, the glasses was a thing. And so I sort of tested my theory on a couple people, and they're like, no. They replaced her with an AI. And so they have kept the real Giorgio, and this is just some kind of AI, improved AI, because she's not talking with the stupid robot voice. So I'm asking you guys, what do you think's going on with Giorgio?
Kevin, you look like you want something to interject.
Yeah, there was something we did, at least I don't remember, that we didn't touch on in discussion with Kovic, who was the, I guess, what would you say, counselor, interrogator?
I would call him a psychologist.
He touched on something when he was able to, it kind of reminded me of that scene in Avengers, Kyle, where you see Black Widow, Natasha go down to Loki in the whole jail there on the big ship.
You mean Read in My Ledger?
Yes, Read in My Ledger, where she is letting herself be threatened and put down by Loki, but she's really there because she's such a great intelligence officer to find out why he is there. And she finds out, oh, he's intending to release the Hulk and destroy everyone. I love the fact that Kovic got down deep into Giorgio saying, wait a minute, why are you with this ship? You probably could just kill him and do whatever, unless there's somebody you care about on this ship. And I thought that was really cool. And talking about what you said, Amy, very possible. Because I think that with her, of all of the interview/interrogations, she's the interesting one here because of the past that she has, the knowledge that she has, the people that she's killed and all that kind of stuff. That would be interesting if that happened. I could totally see that.
Hey, Hayley, any thoughts on this?
So I definitely think that something happened in that interview. I don't think she's been replaced and is an AI. But I do think that he got inside her head. I mean, to a degree, you kind of see her go when he tells her that she's the last Terran, that there hasn't been a crossing in 500 years, and that the distance between the Terran, the mirror universe, and our universe is grown so great that they have no idea that side could be completely gone. The mirror universe could be completely gone, and that she's the last of her kind. And I think that kind of really shook her to her core, because as much as she is this harsh person, and she really is, I think still a part of her, because of her love of Burnham, really is tied to this universe. And that really kind of shook her up. And we don't know what the rest of their conversation was. I really think that there's a good possibility he got into her head and is trying to maybe reform her would be a good way to put it. But I think he's gotten to her, and I don't know exactly how.
I think somewhere along the line in the next episode or two, we're going to get back to that interview and we're going to see exactly what happened there. I think he definitely got into her head, maybe some kind of subconscious signaling or something like that. I don't know, but it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. But guys, we got a little bit of trivia on this episode too, because there's a lot of connection to things of Star Trek past in this episode. So I want to hit a few of them. When Discovery reaches Starfleet headquarters, one of the bridge officers says some of the ships are composed of neutronium alloy based on a rare dense mineral only found in the cores of neutron stars, which producing artificially was only theoretical in the 2200s. This is a reference to Star Trek Voyager think tank in 1999 when the USS Voyager encounters a group whose ship hull is composed of neutronium alloy, which is stated to be beyond the abilities of the Federation and the Borg. So, nice little, another reference into Discovery there. Of course, as Discovery enters the area of Starfleet headquarters, they encounter the USS Voyager NCC-74656-J, the 11th starship to be named after the original Intrepid-class USS Voyager. And finally, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Kovich was born on First Contact Day, April 5th, referring to the events of the movie First Contact. Kovich is also familiar with the mirror universe version of those events in which the Terrans killed the Vulcans, which was depicted in ENT in A Mirror Darkly. Lots of fun little tie-ins and pulling from Star Trek stuff. Kevin.
Yeah, the Voyager episode reminded me Think Tank, and that was the Jason Alexander episode where he guest starred in that, of course, George from Seinfeld. As a relentless bounty hunter race closes in on the Voyager, a sly alien think tank offers to devise a solution in exchange for a particular member of Voyager's crew joining them. So I was just like, oh, that's right, the Jason Alexander episode. So that was cool. I love when they reference past Star Trek episodes for technology.
Yeah, that seems to be something Discovery's doing very well this year, Hayley.
Yeah, sorry, I'm totally perplexed by a ship being made from a core of a neutron star, because a neutron star is extremely dense. Like, you could take like a tiny little piece of a neutron star, drop it from standing height on Earth, and it would pass all the way through our planet. So how a ship could be made out of this and fly in space just does not seem to work for me. But
I was thinking the exact same thing, not.
Science officer Hayley taking all the fun out of it yet again. Nelson.
Can we just give Hayley a little clap in here, because she knows her stuff, and I learned so much listening to her. I love it. I love it.
No, so like I'm totally perplexed by this, but I mean, even if you pounded it out super super thin, it would be still so dense.
So it would not make good armor.
I mean, because it'd be so heavy, it would just crush you. Like, you literally would. It would bring you down, and it would just crush you. So,
what about an iPhone case? To make a good iPhone case?
It'd be too heavy. You wouldn't be able to pick it up.
Okay.
But that would be really good to use that on a ship, because there's no gravity, so it wouldn't be.
But there's gravity. There is gravity in space. Most people think there's no gravity in space. There really is gravity in space. Like, as you get close to an object, objects have gravity. So,
right. So they're not going to be able to orbit planets
or anything.
Right. But they could be in a black hole.
The best thing
and probably survive.
Maybe they could build a space station out of it and in space, but who knows? Amy, any of the other? You talked about how much you like the First Contact tie-ins.
Oh yeah, that was really awesome, and I love how he has said that he studied the Terran Empire. Again, just really interesting to learn a little bit more about the Terran Empire. And another trivia, which I did just find, EMH, was Eli. And I'm going to be teaching a unit in my math class of cryptology, and that's where you, write in code. And so one of the methods it's called a shift, and that moves the letters 1 or 2 or 3, however many, to the left or to the right. So EMH, if you adjust the M and the H and shift it one less, then you get Eli.
Also, too, April 5th, he shares a birthday with Pharrell Williams, Mitch Pileggi, Paula Cole, Hayley Atwell, and Lily James. Just want to let you know.
I feel like I've been taken to school in this episode, ladies and gentlemen. With that, though, we're going to take a quick break and come back and see what maybe we might have picked up in the communications array. But first, here's a little bit of news of what's going on around the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to the Fandom Podcast Network and all of the other awesome shows we have to offer. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, our weekly pop culture news podcast. Bloody Kings, our Highlander podcast. Couch Potato Theater, our podcast celebrating our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite pop culture topics. End Zone, the NFL podcast. Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville podcast. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our Doctor Who podcast. Lethal Mullet, a 1980s and 90s action film podcast. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. And our newest show, Making Treks, a new Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. You can enjoy all of these great Fandom Podcast Network shows on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. Fandom Podcast Network is also on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. You can also find us on Facebook under Fandom Podcast Network. You can also email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter under Fandom Podcast Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Welcome back. We hope you're enjoying everything that's happening here at the Fandom Podcast Network as we try to feed your ears with some great podcasts and give you a little distraction from the world going on outside. But you know what? We set up the communications array, and we definitely have picked up some subspace signals. Hayley, I immediately thought of you when I saw this in the episode, and I wanted to save it for here in Subspace Signals. But this episode of Discovery also paid tribute to Aaron Eisenberg. As Discovery enters the docking area, they come across two starships. One is the USS Voyager NC, the J class, the 11th starship to bear the name. The other starship is the USS Nog, NCC 352070. The Nog is named after the character of Nog from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, who was the first Ferengi in Starfleet. The actor who played Nog, Aaron Eisenberg, passed away September 21st, 2019 from heart failure. The appearance of the USS Nog is a tribute to the late actor. This was just so amazing.
It really, really was. And I thought that was so fantastic. So I didn't know because I don't watch on my laptop, so I'm not like watching it super, super close up. But I saw people putting this out there, and I thought that is just an absolutely wonderful, beautiful tribute to Aaron Eisenberg to have that in there. Such a lovely call.
Yep. Amy?
Yeah, I just wonder who has time to watch it frame by frame. I don't know how it happens, and I am so grateful to those of you who do and then put it out there on social media so dum-dums like me and with poor vision get to experience and learn about this. I think it is very beautiful. I think it is well-deserved. The first Ferengi in Starfleet, that's definitely something to celebrate. My question, and again, being out there on social media, some people are always going to hate, but they're like, well, what about, are we going to see a USS Odo? And what about, actors, we all are going to die. Do we need to, pay tribute to everyone, or can we just enjoy this one? So, social media, I'm not really on it that much, but I was sort of bummed at some people's response to that because I'm like, let's honor and give recognition where it belongs. It doesn't decrease anyone else's status in Star Trek. So I'm just going to say that.
Kevin, I saw you reaching into the wall of treasures back there.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of DVDs and Blu-rays behind me as we're recording, and right behind me is my Star Trek section that I'm very, very proud of. And I pulled out the Blu-ray of What We Left Behind, that great Deep Space Nine documentary. And one of the best things about that documentary, for those of you that have seen it, is when the whole writing crew gets together and basically writes throughout this whole documentary what would have season 8 brought us if they did it. And right off the bat, which a lot of people didn't really care for, but it grabbed you because they killed off someone like right in the first opening panel, was Captain Nog on a starship, and then his starship gets destroyed. So I'm wondering if they kind of were like, well, that's not really Star Trek canon, but for us, when you watch that documentary and how they put it all together, that in my head canon, I could totally see that happening. They brought it to life in a great way to help celebrate Deep Space Nine. So I was wondering if that was on, the creators' minds when they decided to, let's throw a little nod to Nog.
Very, very interesting. I have one more Subspace Signal that wasn't in the notes, but Kevin and I talked about this on the Fandom Show this past Saturday live on our Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. And then as we talked about the passing of the great Alex Trebek. And, American icon, host of Jeopardy for forever, Canadian icon from Canada. But what has come, we also talked about a little bit of what's happened since his passing and the push online to have a particular Star Trek actor take over as host of Jeopardy. And that is one LeVar Burton taking over as host of Jeopardy. I could see this, guys. I don't know if he would do it, but I could definitely see him in this role with his experience with Reading Rainbow and so many other great projects. Kevin, we talked a little bit about this on Saturday on the Fandom Show.
Yeah, I know that there was a petition by fans, and I know that LeVar has acknowledged and really appreciates the sentiment and stuff. Nothing like I don't think he said anything like that he would do it if he was asked. And I'm not sure how this started, but I think it's cool. I think that when it comes to Jeopardy, and I kind of joked about it when I was younger. I watched Jeopardy more when I got older, when I learned more about history and just life in general. When I wasn't so looking at just certain things all the time and not really paying attention to the bigger picture. But the concept, there's reasons why certain shows go on for so long. Obviously, yes, the host has to be good, but there's other shows that have gone on after the original host, isn't around anymore, like The Price is Right. There's just certain shows that people want to continue to watch, The Tonight Show, whatever. But it's because the format is good. There's something good about Jeopardy. And I think that it is a very smart show. It's a great way to learn things. And I think that a host has to have a certain style to doing a show like this, and I could see why LeVar Burton would be one of those, especially with his history with Reading Rainbow and having such an iconic Star Trek character, and also being a director, knowing what happens behind the camera. I would encourage this. I think it would be good, but I think the show Jeopardy, whether it does go on with him, without him, should still go on because it's a great concept. It's a great show.
Yeah. Amy, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, ditto what Kevin said, and I really can't add anything to it. I think you're right. LeVar, when he speaks, if you've listened to him or talked to him at STLV or any other convention, the way that he chooses to use his words is very different, and I think pairs nicely with Jeopardy.
Yeah, I can see that. Hayley, any thoughts?
I remember seeing the petition a couple of days ago on social media, and I thought, well, that's really neat. And that would be really cool. If he would like to do something like that, I would be down for it. I don't think I've watched Jeopardy probably since I was like my kid's age, I don't think. But I think that would be really neat to see.
Yeah, no, I think it would be. Kevin, you got one more thing?
Yeah, I just want to say too, I've gotten a lot of autographs in my time. Been to a lot of conventions. My thing was to usually get some type of trading card signed because they were smaller and I could display them. And I got lots of Star Trek autographs, lots of Star Wars autographs, and I don't do it as much as I used to. Before COVID, I kind of started getting into the picture taking thing more than getting an autograph. But I gotta say, LeVar Burton's autograph is the best autograph I've ever seen anyone give, and that I have. His autograph is fantastic.
I have two, and it definitely is. Hey, so I know we're going to be going, but did you guys watch The Ready Room?
I did.
I have not had the chance yet, so you guys will bring up your point.
Okay, so there's just a couple of things that I really enjoyed about this. So the actress, I have to scroll up. The actress who plays Non, her mom, she mentioned her mom was part of the campaign to keep the original series on and not have it canceled. And I thought that was so cool. She talked about like this pink suitcase that her mom had with like headshot pictures and things like that in it. I thought that was so fantastic.
Rachel Anchorelli.
Anchorelli.
Okay.
Or Anchorelli.
Anchorelli, yeah.
And then, and I didn't get his name, the other person that he had on from special effects,
Zimmerman.
Thank you. He mentioned that, so Will Wheaton asked him about the programmable matter that they have in the series so far. And apparently Kurtzman, he mentioned, you kind of brought up what we have now, ferrofluid. And that it kind of stemmed from that. And I thought that was really quite interesting. And then the best part was some of this stuff going to be in the future Sharper Image store. I laughed at that. It was great.
Yeah, I really liked that interview with Zimmerman too. That was one thing I put in my notes. And I loved the idea of when Will was like, okay, so you know that flip phones came because of Star Trek, and you know that the iPads and touchscreen and holograms and video conferencing, that all came from Star Trek. You are creating, right, the future. Does that even cross your mind that what you imagine might actually come true? I mean, just think about, the people, the creators of the original series, and then living to see these phones, these communicators, and how bizarre that would be. I so want to be Zimmerman or on his crew, just to be like, and then live long enough to see what you imagine come true. I thought that was awesome part of the interview.
Yeah. No, very, very cool. Real quick, Kevin will appreciate this too. If you're a big Will Wheaton fan, we're 1 week away from the release of Ready Player 2, including the audiobook read by Will Wheaton. It is a must listen to. If you've listened to the first one, Will Wheaton also narrated and did the read on that audiobook. It's an outstanding book. Will Wheaton does a phenomenal job reading it. Ready Player 2, November 24th. But with that, you know what? It's been a great episode. We still have about six or seven more episodes of Discovery to go. I was looking the other day. January 7th is the final episode of this season. So we're getting towards that home stretch with Discovery. But as always, we here at the Union Federation will be here to give you every step of the way through season 3 of Discovery. But until next time, hailing frequencies are now closed.